I hope it isn't just me, but aeons above am I still having a lot of fun in Star Rail 4.1. I think as a whole, the Planarcadia arc has done an excellent job of telling a complete story while moving the overarching plot forward in a way that still leaves a lot of intrigue and brain food for us players. I think it was a great choice as well for the story to just pick up from where it left off in the last patch, giving you answers to some of the questions you had from the previous patch. And with so much seemingly wrapped up in a neat and tidy bow, I started to go digging about what my next video should be about. Maybe I should talk about the importance of the abundance and the hunt. Maybe it's the weirdness surrounding how many supplicants there seem to be in this particular iteration of the Phantasmoon games. But neither of those felt quite right to me. And I think that's because there was some lore dropped in the form of readables that imply many things aren't quite as resolved as they seem to be. This is particularly true when it comes to Ryusuke and the Graphia family, because let me tell you, I have a lot more questions about them than I did before 4.1, let alone after finishing the main quest. Yet the thing I find most fascinating about all of this is how so many of these texts seemingly have little links and connections to information given to us in other readables. So this video will likely have some sprinklings of speculation, but for the most part, I wanted to once again put my truth-telling pants on and take a moment to walk you through some of the very easy to miss readables that have materialized on Planarcadia, because they are spicy and I want you to hear all about them. As usual, timestamps are in the description below and spoilers are ahead for the 4.1 storyline and readables. And if you love hearing more about Star Rail lore or just want to hear more of my random thoughts about video games, make sure to like and subscribe. With those formalities out of the way, let's start taking a look at Ryusuke's real name. Yes, that is right, Ryusuke is not the name of Himiko's father. In Ryusuke's Work Appreciation, Part 1, found in the Graphia Academy library, we are given a detailed look into the man's career as an artist, scholar, and educator. And as most books do that reflect on an individual's achievements, it starts with a name. Ryusuke, born David Van Holt on the planet Bathia 2. So it seems like we have a bit of a stage name situation going on here, which I would be saying if we didn't have another readable from 4.1 that lists a different name for David Van Holt. But I don't want to get into that just yet. I want to mention another name that appears in this work appreciation text. It says that Ryusuke studied at the Bragi Royal Academy of Arts prior to his arrival on Planarcadia. But Bragi sounded very familiar to me, and it's because there's a readable from the World's End Tavern called Bragi's Resignation Letter, which was left behind by the renowned masked fool Bragi, the former bartender of the legendary tavern. So just how old is this letter? Is Bragi a common name in the Honkai verse? I don't know what it means, but I do know that it's a great reminder about just how much conflicting information there seems to be about the people that surround Himiko's past. And speaking of, let's talk about the Graphia family, shall we? Located in Ryusuke's office at Graphia Academy is a wonderfully detailed article named History of Graphia Family. Right from the beginning, it explains that the legendary artist Graphia ascended a tower at the end of the world, and upon witnessing the suffering of mortals, she descended to the world to deliver them from hardship, which sounds awfully Aeonic to me. But we are talking about names right now, not divinity. Because of this, she took Murata as her surname to remind her of her original purpose, and that apprentices of the Imaginesis techniques call themselves inheritor of the Graphia art, and that whether they are blood relatives or simply a student, these Imaginicists are known as the Graphia family. So problem solved, right? Himiko is both a Murata and a Graphia, and despite being born David Van Holt, Ryusuke is also a Graphia. Well, not quite. This document goes on to name the members of Graphia family in detail. To keep you in suspense for a little bit longer, let's talk about Himiko's mum. Her name was Roan, and she was described as a once-in-a-century genius artist who died of weathering at the age of 29. Himiko is also referenced very succinctly in the Graphia family history, stating simply that the daughter of Roan perished in the Bloodstained games. With her death, the Graphia line came to an end. So we have even more evidence that Himiko is dead, but let's not dwell on that thought for now. Instead, the focus of my attention in this moment is all about Ryusuke. So let's talk about the name listed in this private family document. Husband of Roan, formerly known as Ryusuke Pissarro. This man from Bathia has now taken on the role of Dean at Graphia Academy. So he was born David Van Holt, then he was known as Ryusuke Pissarro, now he's simply known as Ryusuke. It's giving superstar, but it's the former last name that has me interested, because it once again leads us back to another readable. But let's put that on pause while we briefly talk about the meaning behind the name Pissarro. Ryusuke Pissarro likely takes his name from artist Camille Pissarro, a pivotal figure in the Impressionist art movement. He is often thought of as the father of the movement due to his slightly older age and mentorship of other renowned artists from the time, such as Monet and Degas. Interestingly, for our knowledge, Pissarro was labelled as the Dean of Impressionist painters by virtue of his wisdom and his balanced, kind, and warm-hearted personality by art historian John Raywald. Given we know Ryusuke as the Dean of Graphia Academy, I thought that comparison was worth noting. As for the Impressionism movement itself, it came as the result of changes to technology in the late 19th century, where artists chose to capture moments of everyday life and took their painting outside the studio and into the open air. The name Impressionism came from critics of the time, accusing the works of being unfinished and sketch-like in appearance, with noticeable brushstrokes a common trademark of the artworks. In some ways, Impressionism was a reclamation of art as leisure by simply depicting subjects in a fleeting moment without adhering to the strict hierarchy outlined by the Academy of the time. That's enough about that particular art movement though, as I am not super well versed in the visual arts. I'm more of a performing arts girly, to be honest. Plus, I imagine there are many people watching this that can provide way better value on the topic in the comments, so I will leave that in their very capable hands. What I will say on the topic though, is that Impressionism does seem to fit in quite nicely with a lot of the themes present on Planarcadia, given the IPC's control of the world and Pearl's desire to understand the art of creation, as well as the fact that she used big, visible brushstrokes to patch the cracks, tearing through the world towards the conclusion of 4.1. But more interesting than all of that is that the name Pissarro shows up in another readable from this patch, in an archive from the Bloodstained games. Now, this document pieces together different materials from a variety of publications that occurred during the previous Phantasmoon games, which were so marred with bloody death that they became known as the Bloodstained games. It talks of the IPC getting credit for the Herald of Death's neutralization, UFO sightings, and contains records of the 8 supplicants from that games, with some referenced by name or pseudonym. We had Armstrong, Harbeck, Gardner, Black Birch, Physical Magical Girl, a red-haired woman that we assumed to be Himiko, the Herald of Death, and Carter Pissarro. Given Ryusuke wasn't from Planarcadia, it feels weird to me that this other known last name appears elsewhere in Star Rail, particularly when it comes up alongside the previous Phantasmoon games. There could be so many reasons that this is the case, but it definitely doesn't feel like the last time we'll hear the name Pissarro during our trip to the Land of Elation. Because what do you mean a random supplicant had the same last name as Himiko's dad? I, for one, can't wait to find out why they snuck this one in here. There's one other thing I wanted to talk about as well from this article, and that is the mention of a basketball enthusiast named Big Hawk, who insisted that they were also a supplicant in the games, but were subdued by Graphia Academy staff. So Big Hawk is actually a guy named Eagle who still hangs around the basketball court at the academy, and you can talk to him. Everything he says suggests that he really was a part of the games, but that conflicts with this text. So who should we believe in all of this? Well, probably no one is the best answer I can offer, because it is just too hard to make a good guess on what all these conflicting records mean until we know what the deal with Planarcadia is. Speaking of, I want to highlight a little detail that was hiding right at the very end of the Arcadian Chronicles Keeping Up with Star Rail special program. Right at the end of the video, Albert asks some of the current supplicants Q&A questions. The interviewees in question are not unexpected, and for the most part their answers aren't either, except for when Albert asks what they would do if they won and were Aeon for a minute. Part of Evanesia's answer is covered, so all we see are the words make Planarcadia, with the remainder of the sentence covered by Sparksy's hair. Given the font size comparative to the other signs on screen, there really can only be one small-ish word covered. Prior to 4.1, my brain automatically fills in the blank with the word real, because it seems on brand that the world is suffering from some sort of fictionalization. But now I have two different words in mind. The first and most plausible would be whole, as Planarcadia is almost stitched together like fading paper, which explains the weathering curse afflicted upon the Graphia family. But again, I will not dwell on Himiko's weirdness today. But the other word that could spring to mind is suffer, given that we now know that Evanescia is an abomination of abundance. Maybe she has more sinister intent than we might assume. I highly doubt that option, but gosh, it is fun to speculate, so let me know what you think her sign said. Speaking of things that could be fake, there's yet another readable which has me questioning Ryusuke's identity. The note is called In Memory of an Old Friend and is easily accessible in the Graphia Academy library, so I would recommend you grab it to mull over in depth if you're interested. It recounts some fond memories of a Graphia Academy painter about their friend Ryusuke. The title here is odd because the phrasing in memory of implies that the subject matter has passed. That said, the readable mostly talks about the author's interactions with Roan and how she came to be with Ryusuke. The language also heavily suggests that Himiko was already born and that Ryusuke came into the picture a bit later, or at the very least, that is how I interpret the story being told here. This leaves us with the incredibly interesting notion that Himiko may have a different biological father, and if so, who? And could the answer to that question solve a lot of the mysteries surrounding Planarcadia? Well, my guess would be yes. Last thing I want to say about this particular piece of writing is that we don't necessarily know how old this thing is, but I do find it odd that it finishes by stating that Ryusuke is still out wandering the universe. So when did he come back? Could this be an account from a friend referring to a version of Ryusuke that we don't know? Perhaps his wanderings could explain why Pom-Pom found them to be familiar, and not just because he's Himiko's dad. But who knows? Because for the moment, I sure don't. The absolute last thing I wanted to touch on before wrapping this video is unrelated to Ryusuke, but has ties once again to the Graphia family. Wishpower is still such a bizarre and unknown phenomena to us as the players, but the readable Phantasmoon game Secret Records offers a cheeky bit of extra insight that has been shared and passed down through the Graphia family supplicants across the ages. As we hear in 4.1 and further confirmed in this text, is that one of Himiko's ancestors had an audience with Aha to try and cure the weathering curse that afflicts the family. But the laughter warned that elation cannot heal the curse. So that means another path potentially could, which may explain the presence of an ambrosial arbor. But I won't dwell on that here because I imagine we will find out more about that during the next patch. But that is just my guess, so please don't hold me to it if I'm wrong. Moving on for now, we get affirmation again that Wishpower is at the heart of the Phantasmoon games, and that joy will empower the supplicants of the games. But it also confirms that Wishpower is effectively a shackle which forces the participants to become a puppet to the will and wishes of the masses. It is very similar to how the world works in the anime To Be Hero X, which is one of the best things you will ever experience in your life. If you haven't watched it, please do yourself a favor and go marvel in its absolute glory immediately after finishing this video. But I will save my gushing praise for that show for another time. But the key idea I wanted to mention is that in their world, superpowers effectively come from the belief of others. The more people believe in you, the stronger your power becomes. But by the same token, you often have severe downsides. For example, one of the characters, Ghostblade, is seen as a silent, mysterious killer. But because the world loves that silent nature of his work, he literally cannot speak. And Wishpower reportedly works the same way according to this note. It specifically describes the power as the weight of countless wishes turned a supplicant's body into a puppet of the wish. The readable also describes the duality of Wishpower, and that it responds just as powerfully to hatred as it does to love. As it says, Wishpower is the culmination of imagination and focus. In many cases, it's far easier to draw eyes through terror and hate than through love. But let this be a warning to future generations. Such methods are nothing but a path to ruin. To Be Hero X is also centered around that same premise, that harnessing fear is just as powerful as harnessing hope. And in Star Rail's case, it can lead to the path of ruin, which suggests to me that we may have seen an emanator of destruction emerge from these games at some point in history. Lastly, I suggested in my video speculating that Planarcadia is the work of fanfiction that Himiko could be some type of imagine, but there were many comments quick to point out that it couldn't be possible due to the nature of Wishpower, and I absolutely accept those critiques, but I do want to make note of the wording from this readable. Wishpower is the bedrock of the Phantasmoon games. It flows from the gods and awakens under the Phantasmoon's light, but it also takes root in the human heart. Personally, I interpret this as being another possibility that Wishpower can manifest and maintain itself in other ways. And there is another readable which could support this idea. In Stories and Secrets of the Supplicant Masks, it details how the masks work during the Phantasmoon games and asks the question, where does the Wishpower collected from those destroyed masks go? Current evidence only supports two theories. One, it dissipates directly into Ahartopia's atmosphere, unable to be collected or utilized, perhaps serving as the source of Wishpower for wild Wispe. Two, it transfers to some unknown places, possibly used to cover the cost of reforging masks. Note, if the latter is true, then the accumulated Wishpower would be an astronomical sum over the course of all these Phantasmoon games. So we don't really know what happens to Wishpower after the games. It seems to almost behave like a form of energy which can be transferred into other forms but never completely lost. And if that is the case, then I've got to put my tinfoil hat back on for a sec and say there is absolutely a possibility that Wishpower is what fuels the current form of the Astral Express, which could explain all these bizarre discrepancies surrounding Himiko and her family. And I'm gonna leave you on that for today, because I think it is a marvelous idea to go away and us all have a think about. But before you leave, I wanted to give a massive thank you and shout out for checking out my content. I've been working really hard to get back into the habit of making videos, and the response has been beyond my expectations. So for those of you still watching this far, I appreciate the absolute heck out of you. I've definitely got plenty of other ideas up my sleeve, so if you haven't already, please make sure to like and subscribe so that you can check out my next video the second it drops. And if you noticed any other cool details in 4.1 that I missed, hit me up in the comments. As always, I'm SassQueenAmy, and I'll catch you for more video game fun in my next video.